several states that had approved CBD legislation, they saw their opioid prescriptions start to go down. So that's an area the medical community is really, really focused on.
CBD produces so many effects throughout the body based on the fact it can bind to receptors in so many of our different organs, right? Places as far away as the intestinal tract and your arm and your spinal column, up into your brain. And that's why people say it helps them alleviate pain, right? Maybe help with seizures, which is a pretty serious problem for a lot of folks. Anxiety, pretty common problem that we don't want to treat if we don't have to. Even withdrawal from medications, maybe even the opiates, as Sanjay mentioned. But think about that. People think it can do so many things because of the CBD oil that is in there. It's touching so many parts of our body. And I love your thought that we evolved as species because we had access to these natural plants, and they understandably can affect us.
That's right, and the receptors started to evolve in our body as well. We even started making our own form of CBD in our body. But sometimes it's not enough, just like other things aren't enough in our body, and that's why some people seem to get benefit.
If you live in urban America or urban anywhere in the world, you are inflamed. Your central nervous system is inflamed, as well as your immune system is inflamed, and nobody is exempt because our physiological systems are under assault. Assault from environmental toxins such as herbicides, insecticides, and heavy metals, chronic biological infections such as bacteria, viruses, fungus, and molds, and last but not least, our inflammatory diets, which are very poor, usually way too much sugar, which causes leaky gut, an inflamed gut that allows certain bacterial infestations to occur that gets into our blood, into our systems. So, what kind of symptoms, what kind of stress do all these things cause to us? If your immune system is inflamed, you might be suffering from autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, inflamed bowel disease, lupus and thyroid, or fibromyalgia, or even MS, and your skin, psoriasis and eczema, and all sorts of other chronic infections. Do you realize many of these things didn't even exist 100 or 150 years ago? Incidence of these kind of diseases is growing throughout the last century because of the environmental load of toxins that we are now absorbing into our systems. Now let's take a look at your central nervous system. If it is inflamed, what kind of things might you be suffering from? Brain fog, migraines, epilepsy, anxiety and PTSD, ADD, ADHD, autism, and insomnia. Again, 100 or 150 years ago, these kind of symptoms, these kind of diseases were really rare. And over the last 150 years, because of the insult, the ongoing insult to our systems, these kind of things are more and more prevalent with every single year. So, if you are suffering from any of these conditions, any of these symptoms, CBD might provide you with tremendous healing, tremendous relief, right through your own natural endocannabinoid system that brings homeostasis, both to your immune system and to your central nervous system. So in conclusion, what have we learned from this conversation? That health is achieved through physiological homeostasis, right through our natural endocannabinoid systems. And therefore, CBD is an indispensable catalyst for optimal health. So here we have our CBD receptors in our central nervous system and in our cardiovascular system, where immune cells are constantly circulating. Of course, in our bone marrow, where the cells are actually manufactured. And of course, in our immune organs. Our major immune organs are the intestines, the spleen, and the bladder. And last but not least, the lymph system. So our bodies are filled with CBD receptors. Among other things, Dr. Mechoulam also discovered that we make our own cannabinoids in our body. This is anandamide and 2-AG. Anandamide is something that we create when we're meditating, hence it's called the bliss molecule. And 2-AG, as well as anandamide, are released in mother's milk when a child is breastfeeding. So no wonder that child is so calm and happy when they're breastfeeding. Those two compounds are also associated with a runner's high. You know, that point when you're running and suddenly you're in bliss, you kind of break through the wall and now you just feel wonderful. Those two are the natural cannabinoids that our own bodies make and bind to our CBD receptors. CBD causes a cascade of homeostasis through our entire central nervous system and our entire immune system. So why is this happening? Because as I mentioned before, we have receptors in our physiology for CBD. This is called the endocannabinoid system. Back in medical school, we didn't even know about the endocannabinoid system. It was only discovered in the 1990s by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam from the Hebrew University in Israel, where an amazing amount of incredible biomedical technology and innovations are coming from that tiny little country. So the endocannabinoid system is a network of cells throughout our body that have receptors for CBD. In fact, there are more receptors for CBD in our body than any other kind of receptor. So the endocannabinoid system is truly the largest network of its kind throughout our entire physiology. So we see that throughout our physiology, we have receptors specifically designed to bind with CBD. And CBD has its effect on the nucleus of our cells where proteins are being made. So which proteins are being made from the influence of CBD? CBD modulates the transcriptions of over 1,100 genes that make the signaling molecules that naturally reduce inflammation in our central nervous system and throughout our immune system, restoring homeostasis to both our immune and to our central nervous systems. So as you can see on the left side of the slide, CBD upregulates the genes that create anti-inflammatory biochemicals for our immune system and upregulates the GABA system in our central nervous system, which brings calmness to our central nervous system. And on the right side of the slide, we can see that CBD downregulates the genes that create the inflammatory biochemicals in our immune system and also downregulates the glutamate system in our central nervous system, which causes overexcitation. Central nervous system. And we're going to see at the level of individual cells that the cell surface is covered with these green receptors. These are receptors for CBD. And when the CBD binds to that receptor, it sends a message into the cell, which travels all the way down into the nucleus of the cell, where the intelligence of our entire physiology is contained within our chromosomes.
And this is the chemical structure of CBD, also known as cannabidiol. What you may notice is that their chemical structures seem almost identical. They have the same molecular formula, which is C21H30O2, and both of their masses clock in at 314 grams per mole. But there is one extremely important structural difference. Where THC contains a cyclic ring, CBD contains a hydroxyl group, and this difference in biochemistry actually controls whether or not you feel high. In order to fully understand why, you need to first know about the CB1 receptor. In your unstoned, sober body, your CB1 receptor is affected by a neurotransmitter called anandamide, which controls generation of pleasure, motivation, and feeding behavior. In your unstoned body, anandamide is released after exercising, and it's what causes a runner's high. THC's structure is so similar to anandamide that it fits in perfectly to the CB1 receptor, therefore causing you to feel high. CBD, on the other hand, because of the hydroxyl group, is different in shape and does not fit into the CB1 receptor, therefore it doesn't make you feel high. But CBD does bind to other receptors in your cannabinoid system, affecting you in other ways.
We have specific signals that happen in the body when it comes down to cancer. Specifically, I'm talking about GPR55. In this case, GPR55 is something that triggers minerals and vitamins to be retrieved from the bones to ultimately feed cancer. That's why when people get cancer, a lot of times they end up getting weaker bones. A lot of times they end up increasing their risk of fractures and things like that. So what ends up happening is CBD reduces the body's ability to retrieve nutrients from the bone to feed cancer cells. This is just one of the many ways that CBD has an effect on cancer, and it's one of the most researched. Then we have to talk about dopamine receptors. Dopamine's a simple one. Dopamine is the reward system within the brain. So by activating dopamine, it ends up allowing us to feel better all the time. But it allows us to naturally utilize dopamine. We're not taking exogenous dopamine. We're not taking drugs. We're not taking recreational drugs, things that are actually causing us to have more dopamine. We're naturally increasing the body's utilization of existing dopamine by enhancing the receptor sensitivity. Okay, and in that same vein, we also talk about glutamate. You see, glutamate is something that is excitatory. Glutamate actually triggers energy, but too much of it is a bad thing. Too much glutamate can lead to a seizure, can lead to all kinds of bad things. Glutamate is not what we want a lot of. However, the right amount of it can trigger energy in the right places. So when you think about the calming effect of adenosine, making you calm, and then you combine it with a specific energy effect of glutamate, you actually have a really unique thing. You're calm, but that glutamate is activating, energizing specific parts of the brain that are correlated with memory and retention. So thereby, you can have the right energy in the brain, stimulating creative process, all while feeling calm. So feeling calm, relaxed, anti-inflamed, yet still awake in terms of your brain. So very, very powerful when it comes to that. Then of course we look at the serotonin receptors. Okay, what ends up happening is CBD activates something known as 5-HT1A. 5-HT1A acts in a very similar way as an SSRI, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It allows our body to create more serotonin and utilize it more efficiently. Okay, so that's gonna help you feel good. Serotonin is just a feel-good neurotransmitter in the first place. How many of you have ever had a cup of coffee? Or how many of you have ever had caffeine at some point in your life? Chances are you have. So you know that excited, excitatory feeling that you get. Well, what happens with adenosine is you end up blocking adenosine with caffeine. Caffeine blocks the adenosine receptor, which therefore means that you get more excited because adenosine would normally make you relaxed. So if you have a lot of adenosine in the body, you're relaxed, you might even be sleepy. But caffeine blocks that receptor, which therefore makes you more energized. Well, CBD affects the adenosine receptor by increasing the activity of it. So you might be wondering, well, does that mean it's gonna do the opposite of caffeine? Well, kind of. It's gonna do the opposite of the bad effect of caffeine in some ways. You see, when we actually have caffeine, we are basically blocking that adenosine receptor and therefore triggering a secondary response. We're triggering a secondary response of excitatory catecholamines. What that means is adrenaline, noradrenaline, epinephrine, all of the catecholamines that cause us to have this heightened sense of awareness and alertness. That is what's giving us the energy. It's not specifically the blocking of adenosine. So when we do allow adenosine, we don't have the opposite of epinephrine or adrenaline. There really isn't an opposite of it. It's either just on or off. You don't go fully polar opposite with it. So basically, you're slowing down the epinephrine, you're slowing down the adrenaline, and allowing your body to relax. So it's not like you're gonna have the negative effect where you're super, super sleepy. You're just getting a calming effect, which is why so many people like utilizing CBD oil. They just end up getting confused as to why it's actually doing it. Do not believe all of the marketing that says that CBD oil only affects CBD2 receptors. That is not true. That's not how it works, okay? CBD2 receptors have to do with the immune system and inflammation, like I said. But CBD oil does not directly affect CBD1 nor CBD2 receptors. It doesn't affect them at all. See, what it does is it influences the body to naturally utilize more of its naturally occurring endocannabinoids. See, endocannabinoids are things that our body can create, but we also get them from food and various polyphenols that we consume. It's a totally normal, natural thing. Whether our body uses them is a completely different story. So CBD oil influences the body to utilize more of the endocannabinoids that are already existing, therefore enhancing how those endocannabinoid receptors, particularly CBD2, actually utilizes them. So it's not directly affecting the receptors the way that THC would. But how does it actually work in the body? I'm talking about receptors, and that's all fine and dandy, but what physiological effect does this have? Well, here's the interesting thing. Even though you have a natural utilization of these endocannabinoids, it doesn't necessarily mean that the endocannabinoids are the end-all be-all. You see, it's the byproduct of this. It's the utilization and the activation of vanilloid receptors, of adenosine receptors, and serotonin receptors that ultimately give us the sensation and the end result that we are seeking when we look at a CBD oil. Okay, so the vanilloid receptors end up working with body temperature. They end up working with helping you regulate that system within the body, also helping you regulate inflammation through different ways. If we have a higher core body temperature, it's going to affect our inflammation. If we have a lower core body temperature, it's going to affect our inflammatory levels within the body. So these vanilloid receptors play a key role, and they are directly correlated with the endocannabinoid receptors. So how exactly do these endocannabinoid receptors work within the body? See, we have two different receptors. We have CBD1 and CBD2. And these are all throughout the body. They're not just in the brain. Okay, they're not just affecting the psychoactive portion of the body. Okay, they are affecting the brain, but also even more so throughout the course of the body in our inflammatory system, in our immune system, and everything that we need to know there. Okay, CBD1 is found mostly in the brain, however. So CBD1 is the one that affects your mood, it affects emotion, it affects a lot of things when it comes down to your appetite, even coordination, movement, and pain that relates to your brain and how you perceive it. Okay, then we have CBD2. CBD2 works on the body, works on inflammation, works on the immune system. And there is a correlation between CBD1 and CBD2. They communicate, of course, but one is more so for the brain and one is more so for the immune system and for the body.